Well, it seems to me that the most effective strategy for social and political change is generally going to be to try to recognize and to try to harness and to try to leverage existing trends and momentum within the elite sectors of the society. So rather than taking, say, an overtly adversarial approach to someone like to groups like the owners and controllers of global financialized capital, rather than having a head-on collision with the most influential segment of the society, rather than that, you try to work in parallel and keep pushing from your side to try to steer the trajectory to the outcome that you want. So the OCGFC are moving in this direction, of course, for their own reasons, in pursuit of their own objectives. But if you're moving right alongside them, you can edge them over and get your objective achieved much faster and much more effectively. It's like a cyclist, who lets his competitor go just in front of him and he coasts behind him. It almost pulls him along, and then you can just cut around him once you get close to the finish line, something like that. Because if you're just going to try to confront the OCGFC directly in an aggressive, adversarial, oppositional manner, well, they'll crush you. They'll crush you in an instant. And in that case, I don't even know why you did what you did, except to just try to make yourself feel like you were doing something. But you weren't really serious about trying to achieve any objective. But if you use a strategy of coasting along with the existing momentum of the OCGFC, little by little, altering the trajectory to your advantage, or else convincing them that your goals are not oppositional to their goal, and that your goals don't totally undermine or oppose their goals, then you have a much better chance, I think, of realistically accomplishing something. I mean, look at the Article 6 campaign that we're involved in now, for example. Calls for the U.S. to be expelled from the United Nations. This campaign is informed by the momentum of BRICS and the pivot to the Global South, which is something that the OCGFC are supporting. So you can see a number of indicators, in my opinion, that suggest that the OCGFC have lost any sense of fealty to the United States. They don't have any sense of Western nationalism because, after all, they're bigger than states themselves. They don't care about flags or borders or have any loyalty to any country. I mean, you can see how they're unleashing a scorched earth policy in Europe economically. I think that they want to see the U.S. politically sidelined as much as possible. I mean, think about it. With regards to the UN, there's no real reason why the OCGFC would oppose the expulsion of the United States from the United Nations. They could benefit from that. Any reduction in American political power just creates a vacuum that they can then fill. If the U.S. is expelled from the UN would lose one of its major sources of funding, and that would only increase the potential opportunities for the OCGFC, who could make deals to multiply public-private partnerships and sponsorships and so on, and expand their economic influence at the United Nations. I mean, the private sector already funds many specific programs and projects at the United Nations to the tune of $1 trillion. There's nothing that they love more than an influential institution that needs money, except maybe a government that needs money. And if that institution or that government doesn't need money, then one of their favorite things to do is to try to get that institution or that government defunded and in debt one way or another, so that it will come to them hat in hand. So the OCGFC could see the expulsion of the United States from the UN, in my opinion, as just a logical progression of their campaign to capture public sector power and commandeer it for their own benefit. Or alternatively, if expulsion, or the case for expulsion, results in either the reform, the weakening, the sidelining, or the dissolution of the United Nations, then I think that the OCGFC could assert greater influence in whatever new international bodies, BRICS-oriented and BRICS-related organizations that are formed to replace the United Nations. That would give the OCGFC an opportunity to get in at the ground level to embed their influence in those new organizations. And I don't think that that's something that they would be opposed to. So I don't really see any meaningful reason why the owners and controllers of global financialized capital would necessarily oppose the invocation of Article 6 against the United States. I don't think that they're particularly interested in maintaining America's political global dominance. Or anyway, as I've said, I don't think that there are. I think that there are certain factions within the OCGFC that are not interested in that, and those factions that are more global oriented, which have already that are already embedding themselves in the BRICS project, and which are aiming to take advantage of the pivot to the global South. Now you have to understand, I'm talking now about what their motivations might be, what their objectives might be, and what their objectives logically are in terms of the transition of the moving of the center of gravity of the global economy to the southern hemisphere, what they want to get out of it, what they want, and what they want from our perspective is diabolical. They want to commandeer the whole transition to their advantage, to maintain and consolidate their power and control. That's what they want. That's what they're after. So for that reason, they could potentially support the removal of the U.S. from the UN. I think they might go along with that because they're going along with, if not actively advancing the isolation of the United States. But them getting what they want out of that is not an inevitability, which is why you have to move in parallel with them, intertwined with the existing momentum so that you can steer the trajectory. I don't think that you could do anything that would more assuredly guarantee that the OCGFC do get what they want than if you were to just collide with them in overt opposition. I think that they want, and it makes sense to them, and it does indeed make sense, that the institutions that determine the global order for the rest of this century, that those institutions should be in the global South, and they should be operated and managed by the global South. Political power should shift along with economic power. And I think that we're already past the Rubicon on something like that. I think that the transition is already taking place, and I think it's irreversible, in my opinion. So now it falls upon the governments, it falls upon the public, the population, and the private sectors of the global South to assert themselves to determine what role they will allow for the Northern Hemisphere OCGFC, and how that new paradigm is ultimately going to function, and how it's going to look. It's like once you make an investment in something, and then over time, the deal starts evolving, terms and conditions get added, changes are made. The floor plan of the house that you put money down on starts to look different from what it looked like when you first wrote your initial check as a down payment, but it's too late to pull out. That's what's going on, in my opinion. And that's how this strategy works, and that's what BRICS is doing. I mean, as we all know, and as I've talked about, BRICS started originally as just a marketing idea of Goldman Sachs, but it's become much more than that. It's become a reality. And the BRICS countries are proving themselves to be a formidable force in international affairs. And they're a formidable force, at least partially because they have OCGFC backing. It's like two forces with their own gravitational pulls moving in connection. The OCGFC want to be able to take over, but BRICS is trying to manage their presence because they know that they can't afford to alienate the OCGFC. And the OCGFC also know themselves that they can't afford to alienate BRICS, not at this point. So they're negotiating while working in tandem. They're negotiating what their roles are supposed to be vis-a-vis each other. But now the terms and conditions for how that relationship will develop, what it's going to become, how it's going to look, and so on, that's going to be impacted by the public, by the populations of the Muslim world and the populations of the global South. And the genocide in Gaza is having a massive effect in this regard. And I've talked about this numerous times. I mean, the people of the global South are no longer distinguishing between the Zionists and the collective West. And this is playing out in the private sector with boycotts and with the buy local movement and supporting local domestic businesses and so on. And this is increasing the bargaining power of the BRICS governments vis-a-vis the OCGFC. It's like it's like the OCGFC are being invited to a party only to find out at the door that there's a dress code. So now you have to borrow a jacket and a tie from the host because you thought that it was come as you are, but it isn't. That's the influence of the public. So yes, I think when you move along the same currents as power, then you can influence the trajectory. And I think that that's how you can actually get things done. Of course, there are risks involved, but there are fewer risks involved in doing this than in doing nothing. And there's fewer risks involved in this than taking a hostile stance. And no one should ever get themselves involved in any sort of a social and political effort for change if they think that that effort is supposed to solve all of the problems, because problems don't finish. Challenges don't finish. There's always going to be problems. There will always be things that go wrong. There will always be challenges. But that just means that there will always be challenges to win. There's always going to be opportunities to solve problems. There's always going to be opportunities to set things right that have gone wrong. So there will always be this noble work of trying to improve the lives of people and to improve society. We're never going to live in a time when everything is wonderful. But this is how we distinguish ourselves. This is how we earn the reward of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is how we can pass our test in this life. And then it's the next generation's turn. So what BRICS is doing, even once they achieve it, there's still going to be frictions. There's still going to be power struggles. There will still be problems. And we'll have to face those problems when they emerge. Or our children will face them, or their children. But the problem that we have right now is the problem that we're working on. And I think that we're following an effective strategy in addressing the problems of now, the problems of today. And we're not ignorant of the challenges that can emerge in the future. But an effective strategy like this one anticipates those challenges, and I think to some degree mitigates them. And I don't know what more you could ever realistically hope to do other than this. Because if you are going to try to do more than this, or you think you can do more than this, then you're probably not going to do anything at all. Because if you're getting involved in some sort of a movement because you think it's going to accomplish utopia, then all I can do is wish you a pleasant sleep and happy dreams, because that's the only place that you're ever going to find a utopia, is in your dreams. What we're interested in is real world improvement for the lives of the Muslims and the lives of the people in the global south more broadly. Political independence and economic sovereignty. And we're on a path, I believe, to achieving that. But of course, once that's achieved, then there will be a struggle to maintain it. But that's a struggle for another day and for another generation. But I think that the way that we're moving forward will put in place a system and a culture, realities on the ground, that will make it more difficult for our inevitable political independence and economic sovereignty to be overthrown. And that's entirely based on the type of approach that we're taking with Middle Nation. You know, the U.S. achieved their power and influence through ruthless violence and domination, and it's already falling apart. The Muslims had the longest empire in history, surpassing the Byzantines, surpassing the Romans, the British, and now the Americans. The American Empire is going to prove to be one of the shortest in history, and the period of Muslim subjection is going to be one of the shortest lapses in history as well, because we never lost our character. All of the lands that the Islamic Empire encompassed remain Muslim until now. Every land that embraced Islam still embraces Islam today. Our empire never fell, not in terms of our culture and our character, not in terms of the rules that the population follow in their daily lives, just in terms of governance to one degree or another, but practically speaking, that's comparatively a minor issue. And that's because we never really were an empire in the same sense that non-Muslim empires were empires. We are an ummah. We are a nation of belief, not a nation of race or ethnicity or geographic location or origin or language or arbitrary borders or anything like that. That's what we are, an ummah. That's what we are. That's what we always have been. That's what we always will be. And BRICS, the Global South, is a disparate group of people. It's a lot of people who have very little in common except for their desire to break free from Western domination. Well, we have the desire to break free from Western domination too, but we also have a cohesive identity. And we also have the most important natural resources in the world, and the youngest population in the world, and the highest birth rate in the world, and control over the most important trade routes in the world. And we also have the biggest sovereign wealth funds in the world. Muslim leaders can see, and I think that the OCGFC can surely see as well, that the future is Islamic. And we are people who believe in harmony, integration, mutual benefit, multilateral consensus, and peace and stability. And we have the most experience of anyone in building and managing and maintaining any kind of global order. We did it for more than 1,000 years, longer than anybody else. So yes, the OCGFC are going to try to dictate how things are going to be. But the reality is that they're burning down their own house. And then they're coming to stay in our house. So they're going to have to live by our rules under our roof. And that's the case even if they're helping us to build our house. And even if we're helping them to burn theirs down. And that's exactly what's been happening. And that's exactly what the transition to the Global South actually means.